Welcome back to another episode of VoiceBox After Hours. I am joined today with Alex Michelle Parr, who is the MD of our group of companies. So slightly biased podcast, I think, on this one. Just to kick off some intros, I'm Sophie. Audio description wise, I am in my 30s, female with dark hair and glasses. And Alex?
So I'm Alex. I am a female, mid-40s, so blonde hair. No glasses yet, but I'm sure that will change over time.
That's coming. That's coming. That will hit you. So we thought that we would bring this episode based around the Pride topic, merely because we are in quite a popular month for Pride. June, July are pretty big in the UK and obviously in the US, which is where Alex is currently based. And I think it's fair to say that we can't do hand-in-hand inclusivity and accessibility without touching on the community that is the queer, gay / LGBTQIA plus community, because they do run hand in hand. You know, inclusivity is about including everybody. And I think as a company, we've seen more and more of this come to light. And as a very active member in the LGBTQ community, I thought Alex would be the best person to talk to you about this. So, Alex, first of all, welcome. Not that I don't see your lovely face every day. But I want to kind of jump straight in and talk about, number one, not just being a gay female, which is fine, but being a gay female who is an MD of so many successful companies, and what your journey has been like as a gay woman, sort of climbing, up your way into leadership. Not only as a gay person, but as a woman. I think there's two very different identities there and both minorities. But were there any kind of pivotal moments within your journey that's kind of shaped that path for you?
Thanks, Sophie. I guess it's when I was asked to do this podcast, I've had to kind of reflect on the last 25 years of my career. And, you don't often get an opportunity to do that. You might think about the last year or even the last 2 years. But to go back to kind of in my first job, leaving university at 21, and then where I am now, it's quite a nice experience actually to do it. But one that I probably wasn't expecting to do. I guess my first job was, I've always been pretty open. So I know a lot of my friends aren't as open as I am in their work life. I feel like I've always been fairly comfortable being out with my colleagues. But I think there's a difference between being out with the people that you work with and then being out in a wider business community. So if I was going to attend, maybe trade shows or client meetings, I don't think I was. I think I'd use language that was very neutral. So my partner, I wouldn't use kind of she pronouns. So I don't think I outwardly lied about my sexuality, but I would be careful, and I would want to feel comfortable in the setting that I was before I kind of gave that part of myself outwardly.
Is that because of maybe the response you might have received? Because we're going 20 years ago, we were a slightly different place with gay rights. Was it maybe because of the response or the reception you might have received?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a cross change period. So there was, I know I've got friends who are like 10 years older than me, and they had a much more difficult time coming out. I think when I was coming out, we were just changing over. It was just starting to, you'd get a few characters on TV that you felt represented you. They were never in major roles, and
always the headlines of the newspapers the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like this crazy, oh my God, there's a gay person on Coronation Street. It was that type of kind of feeling, but it was out there. It definitely wasn't at the time when it was cool. Like that came probably kind of 5 to 6 years later, but it was starting to be represented. I think my experience really hit hard when I started working in the finance sector. So back then the finance sector was very conservative. It was the 2000s. I think where I worked, only 3% of the sales staff were women. And the majority of the sales staff were white males in their late 30s and 40s. So I kind of really stood out from that. And because I did do well quickly, I soon came into a position of, responsibility. And I think I just wanted to fit in. So yeah, I think when I went to these kind of trade shows and I was meeting people who I didn't know, I was just a little bit more wary about the response. I didn't want any, negative comments, people treating me differently because of my sexuality. So yeah, I guess that was my, the first few years of work life. And I think it really hit hard when I actually changed careers. So the financial crash happened in, I think, 2008, and I decided to get out from the finance industry. I took a job at 118 Media, and I had big aspirations to be a director by the age of 35. Now, looking back, like 10 years ago, I'm like, what? It's just a number. But I was really gung-ho on it. I'm like, I am going to be a director by the time I'm 35. I was the sales manager at 118 Media, and an opportunity came up for a director role. And I applied for it. I thought, I've got a really good chance of getting this. It's kind of like the next step up. It's my team that I'll still be overseeing. I was doing really well. I was hitting all my targets. And there wasn't really anyone else in the company that had the work experience that I had. So I was like, right, I've got this. This is going to, I was 33, I think, at the time. And I was like, right, I'm going to get this job, and I'm going to be a director by the time I'm 35. And then I didn't get the job, and I was so surprised. And the person that got the job was a male in their early 40s, and didn't really have a lot of experience, but was one of the boys. Went to London a lot with the directors, and kind of was a nice guy and everything. But it always made me think, did I not get that job because I'm a woman? Did I not get that job because I'm a lesbian? Did I not get that job because I'm not one of the boys? And it was quite a pivotal moment for me, because I'm like, I'm not having this anymore. I am the most qualified to do this job, and I haven't got it for something that I can't change.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that kind of hit hard, but it was the catalyst that I needed to move jobs, and it was one of the best things that I've ever done. So I started looking around, seeing what was available on the market, and that's kind of where Wolfstone comes into it. So this is 12 years ago. So Wolfstone was a very different beast than it is now. The Wolfstone Group now is made up of 7, in probably 24 hours, 8 companies. And it's a global group that's growing quickly, and aspirations to be even bigger than we are now. But 12 years ago, that was not the company. The company was one company based in Swansea. And I remember going for the interview, and I don't know if this isn't going off topic a little bit, but it's just an interesting story. So I went from these shiny, open plan, lovely offices in the centre of Cardiff to this interview in this converted Victorian house in Swansea. Not even the city centre of Swansea, like. And
if anyone knows Swansea, they knew what you're saying.
Yeah, like it was a very different vibe. I remember I got escorted down these like stairs into the basement. The stairs were a death trap, and I got escorted down the stairs, and I got put into this boardroom. Well, they called it a boardroom. It was like a room that I had like one small window on this, like near the top of the ceiling with bars on it, and I had a really big desk in it that took up the whole room. So you had to kind of like pinch in. And in front of me were the two owners and the head of HR. And I remember sitting down going, well, this isn't for me. This isn't going to be the job that I'm going to take. I'm just going to go through the motions. So I had a 3-hour interview. And as, kind of 15, 20 minutes into the interview, I was like, you know what? Close my eyes, forget about the aesthetics. This group of people, I've got a lot of ambition. The company was female-led. A lot of the managers were women. it was a language service company. So they had a lot of staff that were international, came from different backgrounds. It was such a different feeling and vibe that I ever got in financial services. And I thought I could make something here. And they offered me the role with a fast track to director within 12 months. So I got to hit that stupid figure that I placed in my head and put so much pressure on. I guess the rest is history. And I've been really lucky in this role that I am the CEO or the MD, depending on what side of the pond you're at. And I've been able to shape it and be very comfortable with who I am. And I hope that means that all my staff around me feel very comfortable that they can be who they are. And that's been one of the things that I look back on and I'm most proud of.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously I've been employed now for 7-8 years. And speaking of funny interview stories, now, Alex, I've not spoke about this before. Maybe you don't remember, but my first interview was with a previous manager, and you interviewed me for a second time. And and what happened was that I'd arrived early.
Wasn't I lovely?
I'd arrived early for the interview, and I was having a nervous cigarette outside. This is back in the days when you used to smoke.
Oh,
and
back in the dark days.
In the dark, yeah. And this was in the old office. And you came downstairs and you were having a cigarette. And what was really interesting is I'd done a bit of homework by just looking on the website. And for whatever reason, I had it in my head that when they were like, oh, the female boss wants to interview you, I thought it was going to be Anna, who was one of the owners of the company. So you came downstairs to smoke, and I was already stood outside, and I was like, oh, are you interviewing me? And you were like, yeah. And oh God, I said the most stupid thing. I cringe thinking about it now. And I was like, oh, your surname, is it Polish? And you said, no, I'm from Manchester. And I was like, oh. And then I thought, well, that's really strange because it sounds like a Polish surname, only to realize, after I started working there, that you were in fact not Anna and you were Alex. And I just got very confused between two female, owners of a company that I just assumed. And I remember going into afterwards thinking, gosh, you must have thought that I've got something wrong with me with the fact that I would have thought your name being Parr, doesn't remotely sound Eastern European. And yeah, I just thought, oh God, that was a great start. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But yeah, having worked there now for such a long time, we do have a very inclusive, I say home life, but office life. And I think that everyone is very comfortable. We're a complete melting pot of cultures, sexualities, within the group. And I don't really think there's an issue with any of them coinciding or working with anybody. I think it's been fine. And I think we support the right causes and we celebrate the right things. And I think that's all really important. But more so for me as a female, especially when I work more on the tech side, having female leadership is crucially important. And I had a meeting about this morning, but there's just so few women in tech and so few women CEOs because of the glass ceiling, not just on sexuality, but on gender. And so it's a huge relief for the majority. Maybe the boys feel the same. I've not asked them, but the majority of the girls, we like having female leadership. It's really important. And it's a little bit of inspiration of being able to climb the ladder, that having a woman who's done it before, opens that pathway for the next sort of generation to do so. Not that you're not much older than me. You're not. I just think
any company, like from the management board downwards, should have variety. We don't,
absolutely.
There's so many boards out there where you could just look at each other and everyone is the same. I don't think that's best for business. I think having different ideas, having different backgrounds, that's going to improve your creativity. And it also, I want to be challenged. I don't want people sat around me just saying, yes, that's a great idea. I want people to say, well, Alex, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And the only way you're going to get those different opinions is by having a wide variety of different backgrounds around you, if that's male, female, if that's gay, straight, whatever that might be, it just needs to be a mix. And I think that brings out the best in business and in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I probably speak for everyone when I'm not the only one. I never say yes to anything. I think I probably push against everything that comes my way. I'm definitely the challenge that was designed.
We only need those black hats. We need those black hats. And
here I am. So within VoiceBox, we've been doing like a bit of a pivot into the accessibility space. And, with that, I think we've kind of discovered like a whole realm of inclusivity that I feel like, day to day, we experience, not being from maybe fully white families or Christian families, or like my middle son is gay. I think that we all have our own experiences of the lack of inclusivity. And, I actually came to you when my son was being bullied in school for his sexuality. And I kind of feel like these sort of things cross over with really good understanding. But what I have discovered is more so for the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas is the representation of this in the mainstream media. We see more of it in live events. We're seeing stand-up comedy based around homosexuality in a good light. We're seeing lots of these issues being brought to light and becoming mainstream, which I think is really important. And, my son is a TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram user, and it's really good for him to see representation. And I feel like there are still underrepresented voices within the industry. And I think VoiceBox has kind of like really challenged itself. We speak to BSL interpreters probably every day. We have think tanks with blind or deaf people being able to review work and let us know where the research needs to be done. And not long ago, I interviewed Fern, who's a blind broadcaster. Does this affect your leadership in terms of that mission that VoiceBox is on? Do you feel that there's more challenges with us really? I understand when we fill out an awful lot of RFPs and we go to companies, I think a lot of the time they ask us these questions. How many of you are not white? How many of you are not straight? And we find that we're ticking boxes and companies hire based on diversity. But in terms of a leader, how does your sort of mission, does it have to change with keeping with the times? Do we have to be aware of who we're hiring, who we're working with, how we look to other companies versus the company culture within?
I'm a big believer that people should be given opportunities based on merit and not any other reason. But I think you've also got to kind of make sure that you're doing checks on yourself to make sure that you're not being unconsciously biased. Yeah. So I think it's important that you do keep records, but I don't think you should be a slave to those records, because you don't want to just hire someone to tick a box. I don't think that's the best thing for a business. But as I said, I think you should be aware that if you've got a team and it's not very diverse, then you're probably losing creativity and you're losing different opinions, and that's not good for business. So it is tricky to get that middle ground. Yeah. But I think as long as you're evaluating it on a semi-regular basis, and you can normally tell, we've all been into those companies where everybody looks the same. Like they're obviously not doing a great job on that. I never go into our offices and think, oh my God, we're all just like,
carbon copies.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you are our token gay at the moment. So I kind of feel like, how does it feel for you to be the one where I get to tick the boxes and be like, yeah, we've got gay stuff. We've got, white, non-white, black, non-straight. You tick so many of those boxes. And the fact that you're under a certain age, you're white, you're female, you're gay. I mean, hip, hip, hooray, you do tick those diversity boxes. Yeah, not a diversity hire, but you are ticking the boxes all the same.
I think in any company you get ebbs and flows. I think, I'm a big believer that it's not a life science working for the group. If a lot of our staff work there for maybe 4, 5, 6 years, and then they go on to bigger and better things, and I understand that. So, I think at our highest in the last kind of 6 years, it was probably about 10% of the workforce that was gay, which is crazy high if you think of the national averages. Yeah. But then, right now, a couple of those people, they'd hit their glass ceiling at our job. They couldn't progress any further, and they wanted new challenges and moved on. And, it's the same with people of color. I think, that ebbs and flows. So that's what I mean. You can't just, oh, you're gay, I haven't got a gay person in the office, I'm going to hire you. That's not the right approach. But it's about being open and not, and if somebody walks through the door and they may be not the typical person for that role, like in the old days, a woman working in for a science job and it's just an automatic no, like that's what you've got to be aware of and make sure that you're not doing. And as I said, it's about hiring for skill and promoting within and just being aware and just making sure that you're not bringing any prejudice. Mostly prejudice come in and people don't mean to. It's unconscious. So it's just making sure that there aren't any parts of Wolfstone that maybe unconsciously not bringing in the right kind of people. I guess in the male female, you find a lot of sales forces are male dominated. That just seems to be a trend, but it's more because more people go for those jobs. So that it is a trend, and it probably is a bit of a bias. But at the same time, if you're getting 8 men apply and 2 women for the job, the chances are a male's going to get it just out of the statistic. Yeah, exactly. So it's a tricky one, but I think as long as you do review it on a regular basis and you do have open conversations, you're not always going to get it right. But I think as long as you're open, then that's all that we can do. And sometimes where you're based can have an impact on that. If your company is in the middle of the Welsh Valleys, you're probably not going to get a lot of diversity coming for jobs. While if you're in the middle of Cardiff or London, the diversity is probably higher. So there's lots of, I don't think it's as black and white as people make out. And I think as long as you're trying and you're aware of these things, that's what you can do as a business leader.
My brother is openly gay, and he worked many, many years at the BBC. Mm-hmm. And I had a really interesting conversation with him a couple of months ago, completely unrelated to this, where he said, I always downplayed my gayness because I wanted people to take me seriously. And I didn't want to come across kind of as like a fun camp, happy, stereotypical gay. I needed them to take me seriously. He's like, even to, how he would sit. He said, I'd sit in a more straight way with like my legs open and take up space. And he's an overthinker at the best of times, but he really overthought it. And he was under female management. And I was kind of like, everyone, like, we can all tell you're gay. And he was just like, yeah, I know, but I don't want to come across as like the fun, stereotypical gay because I need people to take me seriously in my career. And especially working in media, he was just like, oh, it's such a typical hire, and I kind of feel like he really had to downplay his sexuality for many years. Aside from the fact that we went to a boarding school where, it was always joked about, oh, you'll all end up gay. I went to a girls' school, oh, you'll end up gay, when he actually did. But he really had to downplay it because he didn't think he would be taken seriously, which I think is more of an issue for men than women, because I often wonder if the stereotype of a gay woman versus a gay man are very different things. I think the stereotype of a gay woman is someone who's quite serious and driven. And I think the stereotype of a gay man is they're just sort of messing about and playing and they're very lighthearted. And in the reality of me knowing both, gay men and women, that's nothing what it's like. And it's just interesting that as a man, he really had to downplay that. And I'm talking in the last 8 years. I'm not talking kind of historically. He's younger than me. But it is just interesting how I think that certain people would have to downplay certain things just to get on in a career. It just seems crazy, especially in media where I think, I'm probably statistically one of the few straight people who work in the industry. It's horrifying at the same time, because I would never, as you well know, I won't downplay any part of me regardless of what it's for. And I think it's a tragedy that people have to do. And this is coming from someone who, originally started working here in a hijab. Like, I wouldn't downplay who I was whatsoever. And I kind of think, isn't it insane how me wearing a hijab at work, I didn't care what anyone thought about it, but could I have been gay? I might have kept it quiet on the off chance I wasn't taken seriously or I wasn't hired because of it. So yeah, it's just food.
Yeah, I think it's really sad actually that people have to go through that. I think we all have to a certain extent a persona that we put on for work. And that's not always 100% of what you are like at home. And sometimes that's okay, but it depends how far that goes. Because if you're hiding your true nature and it's making you, depressed or not liking your role, then it's gone too far. If it's because, you're putting on that persona to help with your confidence and be able to do the job that you're doing, and then it's nice to take that off and then relax when you get home. There's a level of that might be okay, but I think that's very personal, and you need to decide where that level is. I think in the past, the personalities were too different. I was so laid back at home and so driven at work that it started to interfere in my personal life, and I started to, feel the pressure of work. And I've tried to, in the last few years, combine those two personalities a little bit more. I'm a little less. Well, you'll probably see actually because you've worked with me for quite a long period of time. But I feel like I'm more relaxed at work now. Even that, as I said, that story before about chasing that directorship at 35. Like I look back at that now, and I'm like, I was crazy. Like
the energy it takes to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. What would have really happened if it had been 37 when I hit that figure? Would have the world ended? Probably not. But that's the kind of person that I was. And I think sometimes, if you are putting on a face for work, you really got to ask yourself, is it worth it in the long term?
Absolutely. Well, that leads us beautifully onto the next question. And that is, what is the reality of being a woman, queer, and a business leader all at once? Do you think that people still underestimate what leadership can look like, especially as a woman? Do you think that it kind of changes how you make decisions? Do you think that, are you a hidden weapon, I guess? Do people not see quite what a serious businesswoman you are because you're a woman or because you're gay? Do you kind of approach tables of men? And I know that we do a lot of acquisitions, and I know that you're number crunching all of those, and there's always lots and lots of calls. Do you ever feel like you're going to be underestimated before you even get there?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I get quite a lot of comments like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to be like that. Or
especially with a name like Alex, where you could be male,
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Male, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if people have been communicating via like email or something. Less so now because I've got my picture on the email. But I remember like a few years ago when I didn't. Yeah. I'd turn up and they'd be like, "Oh, I didn't think you were a woman." And very quickly now, like ever since I started Wolfstone, if I go to a meeting, I'm very quickly like, "Oh, my girlfriend." I won't use. I sometimes use the word partner, but I'll put she and stuff. So it's very, within a few minutes, people know that I'm a woman, even though my name's Alex, and I'm madly in love with my partner, and she's a woman, and I'm very open about that. So if people have got an issue with it, then for me, it's very much changed from it's no longer my issue; it's their issue. If
I feel like you have to get that in to avoid assumptions, like to get it in quick.
I just prefer to get it out there, and then at least then if it comes out organically, like maybe in the middle or the end, I don't have a sudden shock factor with somebody. So it's just easy for me nowadays. It's just easier to get it out there. One of the big changes is I'm on social media now. I'm talking about when I go to Pride events. I've just recently been to DC Pride, and it was all over my LinkedIn. And it's a professional platform, but LinkedIn also, it's a way of getting your personality across as well. So I feel that rather than just being this like, oh, I'm a CEO, and a very great
acquisitions, yeah,
like one-dimensional character. I'm now, my true self is out there in the business world, and I think, that leads into being a role model for the younger generation to look up to, and not that I want them to go, oh, I want to be like Alex. I just want them to be like, you can be in that position, and like your brother, you don't have to hide yourself. You can just be yourself. And yeah, I'd like, because I know there's a lot of, there's probably quite a lot of CEOs that are gay or queer, and we should all be visible about it. We don't have to throw it down people's throats, but let's not hide. Like if we're doing something, if we're attending a Pride event, or if we're attending an award that's celebrating that, then don't be afraid to show it. I think I think sometimes I worry, am I going to lose a client over it? If I go for an acquisition to buy a company and the owner of that company is anti-gay, are they not going to want to sell it to me? So I still have those doubts in my head, but I'm also hopeful that that's not going to be the case, and people are better than that, and that it doesn't matter.
Well, I should never fail to shock you. I think that's the reality, and you're not far from the truth. I don't have Instagram or Facebook or anything. I think it probably was on LinkedIn because that's how sad I am. That's my social media. And someone actually, as they do every single year, what do we still have a pride for? When's the straight day? And I'm like, straight days every day. And until you start getting killed for your sexuality in certain parts of the world, we'll continue to have pride. And it just really annoyed me because I was like, that's like me turning around and saying, well, why are we having a Black History Month? Like, for what? It doesn't affect me. So why are we having one? Well, because it's important. The same way we have International Women's Day, and then men every year, of course, predictably. Well, when's International Men's Day? Every day that you have the rights that we don't, that's your day. And I kind of feel like we have companies splashing beautiful rainbow logos around, and I feel like it's become the new greenwash of the eco-friendly movement. Yeah. And I took my son to Pride on Saturday in Cardiff, and the parade was fantastic. And we saw lots of companies, Principality, Alliance, Tesco. There was companies there. There were small grassroots there. And the one thing that really humored me was that the Tesco guys and girls, I don't know if they just put like a memo around all the Tesco's in Wales being like, if you're gay, can you come to Pride? Because every single member of staff was gay. There was no allies. They were all gay. And I was like, this isn't even, they've got a really good gay hiring ratio, or they've just kind of said, if you're gay, could you come along? But I was really impressed by it because I was like, I've never seen this many gay people working in Tesco. So it was really good. But I don't just want to see the rainbow washing. Be inclusive, hire the gay people that you talk about supporting, support, charities that need it. And I think in certain parts of the world where being gay, queer, trans is incredibly illegal and not going to put you in prison, but could get you death, I don't blame some CEOs for keeping that aside where they do business with certain parts of the world. And I kind of think there has to be a business moment. And I think possibly the same for females. I know that some females in the world, in some places of the world, females aren't taken seriously, least of all as a CEO. And I kind of think, do you then send a male counterpart, or do you have to just try it, fail, and then hope that they learn from it? Because the world is changing.
I was at the Bio conference in Boston just last week, and at that conference, there's 20,000 people there. And one of the biggest stands was the Saudi Arabia stand. And I was so surprised to see so many female speakers at that stand. Yes. So they had it was crazy. They had a upstairs to their stand. They had stairs. It was a house.
Of course they did. They have all the money.
And in the middle, there was like a big presenting stage. So they'd have different speakers on every half an hour. And the lineup, there were so many great female scientists in that lineup. Fantastic. Yeah. And I think, sometimes we can get caught up in stereo, like on the past, like, oh, it's always been like that. It's like I know a lot of Brits go, oh, Asia's not as advanced as us. And then when you actually travel out there, you see that they've got the best trains, they've got the best infrastructure, they've got the best buildings, it's all lovely and clean, and it's so much more modernized than we are. And I think sometimes we get caught in this history loop where things used to be a certain way, so they're always going to be that way. But I can, just from that one trade show, it was just lovely to see, because I think most people would have said, oh, the speakers there will mostly be men, especially in the science field. But over half of those speakers were women. So it was, and they were the ones that were engaging with you and speaking with you, and it was bilingually
as well, which is incredible. You've got to be smart to be. So I just absolutely. But there is a very small cynical part of me, and I think I witnessed this at Pride, of companies turning out just to be seen there.
I totally agree with you there. I get really frustrated in June when every single company just has a rainbow on something, and the rest of the year.
World Wildlife Federation were at Pride, the WWF for pandas, like panda sponsoring or something. And I was just like, what is your policy on gay people within your company? And they were just, we're just here to get signups. That's not okay. You're using this space for an advantage that I don't think is fair. And call me cynical, but, having been a big part of the Arab world for a while, I think producing females at an event like that would very much work in their favor from a business perspective. And I think we're kind of reversing it then. It works in their favor to do that. It works massively in their favor, not to demerit or to discredit any of the women who came. They probably did have very good male counterparts, but what's the best way to loop in a Western country is to prove that, you can drive now, because people in Saudi Arabia think that women still can't drive. So, I kind of feel like they've got to bust these myths that have been going on and break these stereotypes by almost overachieving.
But I also think that, the world is changing and we've got to not fast enough in certain areas. There's so many countries where, like you said, it's still very much frowned upon. It's illegal. I think sometimes because I live in the Western world and I'm this movement has been going on for, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and there's been so much progress, you kind of forget that there are pockets around the world. And actually, if you look at it in a map, it's still a very large percentage of the world is still very, very anti-gay. And I just think we need to just become more global. Everybody, I think eventually, that people, if they get to see other cultures and see that everyone can be who they want to be and they can add value to the world as themselves and not hide away, then that's how change happens. That visibility, having my face on social media, getting somebody to see that who may be from a part of the world that doesn't have that opportunity. I think just educating and getting it out there and people seeing. It's like I said about the gay kiss on Brookside, that then people started to think, it's normal, it's on Brookside, oh my God, this is like a normal part of the world. And it slowly started to become just, when you see a gay person on TV now, nobody's shocked, are they?
And I don't ever really pay attention to what anyone's doing in the street, but you'll see gay couples holding hands. And I generally think, I just get on with my day, I don't think anything of it. But my children don't even bat an eyelid because they're so used to just gay people just being gay. Whereas if I'd gone out with my grandfather, bless his soul, he probably would have taken a look at those two blokes holding hands. He probably would have had something to say about it. But I acknowledge that it's there, but I don't really feel a way about it. I don't care what people do. But my children don't even notice. They just walk past it as if it's just the same as anybody else, which it is. But they have absolutely they've not grown up in a world where
it's not normal.
It wasn't always as it was. Yeah.
Everywhere they look, they see that. They see it on TV. They see it in music videos. They see it in the streets as they walk around. So that's what I mean. That's what we need to see more of. It's actually quite. I was walking in Boston, and my girlfriend came up for the weekend so that we could explore Boston, and we were holding hands. And I saw this straight couple walking at the side of us, and the lady nudged the guy and pointed at us, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And then she grabbed hold of his hand, and so she was kind of. Yeah, so I think the comment probably was, "Look, they're holding hands. I want to hold your hand. Why do you never hold my hand?
Why not hold my hand? They're not bothered." Yeah, absolutely.
So it's gone full cycle, and I love that. It's and I find that we are more. I don't know, when you're walking around, you always see. The gay lads and the lesbians and the trans, they do hold hands a lot. They are more affectionate in public now. I think gone are the days where you have to go to a dark corner to be able to show affection. That's not to say, go over the top, but, I don't think I feel like it's just a normal part of our society these days in the UK.
And I think touching on where you said some parts of the world are not tolerant, and I'm not going to name the country, but when I was inviting you and your girlfriend to another country for an event, and they addressed her invitation as Mr. And I don't know if you noticed that. And I was like, how interesting, because she doesn't have a masculine name, but they just assumed because you were a couple, one of you had to be a boy. Ironically, they thought it was the one not called Alex. But I was like, oh, how funny that it hasn't even occurred to them that they could both possibly be Ms. or Miss or Mrs., that they just assumed one of you had to be Mr. And I kind of was like, that's not right. That needs to be changed. But it's very interesting how they would assume one of you is a male because you're a couple.
You know, I think, you know, we're not going to name the country, but I was a little bit ahead. I like to go on holiday to places where I'm going to feel comfortable. And I did have a bit of a question mark about going to that particular location. But I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised that actually the people on the street, you know, the general population, no issues at all.
No,
don't really care. No, you'll always get some.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be the countries that are religiously run, and that is not one of them. That's more of a cultural thing than it is a religious thing. I think the religious countries are a entirely different kettle of fish, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think maybe that might be more like historic, and I think things are changing. And again, that's probably because culturally wise, you know, they're getting a lot of, you know, American TV, a lot of
Western American, and British.
And they're seeing these things, so it's becoming less and less an issue. And I think as long as, you know, you respect other people's beliefs and you're not rude or disrespectful, then as I said, I was very pleasantly surprised, because there was a little bit of a concern. I was like, why am I going here when there's so many other places I could choose, you know?
Yeah. And I think we did some subtitling for a company up in Scotland who will remain nameless. And they focus on the elderly community of the LGBTQ world who couldn't be out when they were younger, but now that they're old, and I say old, they're like 70 plus. Now that they're old, they're out in a community where all the old gays just hang out together, and they like do chess and they do little outings and they just live in their best lives, finally getting to sort of live freely. And it raised a couple of questions amongst my circle when I was like, how many of us have had an uncle or an aunt, elderly, bearing in mind most of my friends are 30s and 40s, never got married, lived with a friend, or lived by themselves, didn't have children, which, bearing in mind they were of the age where they would have had kids and got married quite young. And I was like, my Uncle Eric lived on a very remote island in Scotland for the last years of his life. Avid knitter, excellent knitter, never got married, ever. Had a very, very long-term male friend who they used to hang out all the time. And I look back on it now, he's died. And I'm like, was he gay? Did he just not come out because he was born in the 30s at the time, you know? How many of us know an elderly member of family who's just lived with a friend and could never live their authentic selves? And I think a big push of those that are in the community is to almost thank the elderly gay community of what they had to be persecuted for, pretty much, so that today's youth can walk around not undetected. You know, gay bashing is still very much alive and it's still a thing, but less so when it comes to hiring or not renting a house to someone because they're gay. You know, there was an awful lot of that going on. In the olden days. It's
I've got a couple of friends who are like 15 to 20 years older than me. And sometimes we talk about our pride experiences, and their pride experiences are very different to mine. Like, I did have a little bit of bullying when I first came out. I say I'm from Manchester just because I'm from a small town half an hour away called Toppenden, and nobody knows it. But that was a very small town. Everybody knew, you know, like if I did something in the afternoon, my parents would know by the evening. You know, it was a very small town. And when I came out, there was quite a bit of bullying, especially I went to an all girls school and yeah, some of the girls were pretty nasty, to be fair, when I came out. So I kind of knew there was like a little bit of, you know, bullying. But when I talked to my friends that went to pride marches and the police would be, you know, being very aggressive to them, you know, they would be in riot gear at these prides.
Yeah.
And
with batons, beating people.
Batons and shields, and people got hurt at these events. And, you know, I think every generation needs to make things better for the next generation. And I think we've seen that to a certain point, but I'm not sure. I think at this particular time, we are starting to revert back to, there is more prejudice, I think, in the world now than there was probably 10 years ago. I think a lot of nations are becoming more isolist. I think, there's a lot of right-wing feelings out there. The world economy is not as affluent as it was. So,
they say that we revert back to conservatism as soon as there's going to be a recession. And that comes back to the trad wife, the traditional man and woman get married, she stays at home. And I've seen this reflected, ironically, in fashion. The modest wear's coming back out. Pretty Little Thing has famously scrapped all of their festival neon bikinis and opted for full covering long dresses. And this is now reflecting in the gay movement in that, well, actually, that's not right. And we'll go in for the, 2.4 children once again. And unfortunately, usually in the movements before war, we see this happening, not just in fashion, but in cultural movements. And I think it is going to be the gay community that's probably going to suffer at the hands of that.
Yeah, minorities usually are the first ones to be scapegoats, and what people are trying to do is detract from what's going out elsewhere. So they pick minorities as an easy target. So
everyone talks about that. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, the last few years, I've definitely seen more of a backwards trend as it for some minorities and in some areas. So I think that's why it's, you ask about, is pride relevant anymore? And I think probably more so now than it has been in any time in the last decade. We all really need to come together. And not just if you're gay, everybody should be able to live their lives the way that they want to. And we should all celebrate that. And if anybody is trying to tell a certain minority or group of people that they can't, that's wrong. And we all need to stand up for that. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting few years. And I'm hoping this is a very short-lived trend and we go back.
I hope so too, because the women's rights are being targeted as much as the gays. And I feel like once again, it's the minorities, and what comes next, because I don't think the persecution of blacks has ever gone away. Are we bringing it back before it's even finished? And obviously, you're over in America and I'm in the UK, so we do see things in very different lights, especially when it comes to kind of the minorities. I think you probably witness far more acts of racism than we do in the UK. And I think we're probably, I would actually say that the UK is sort of more transphobic from what I see all the time. And there was a big demonstration yesterday. And I wonder how much of this is media led. There was a demonstration in Downing Street yesterday for trans people saying that they want their rights, which the law didn't change. It was just kind of clarified, shall we say. But they didn't interview any trans men, only trans women. And I thought the only way to rile up a country is to say that female spaces are under attack. And you've deliberately picked trans women to try and argue otherwise, which I kind of think, if you'd have that discussion with trans men, I just feel like the rhetoric within the media right now is incredibly damaging.
Exactly. And they want to, they want the views. So they're picking the most polar topics to display on your social media.
And of course, with the right-wing movement being so prevalent, both in the US and the UK right now, we've got Farage reading out letters from immigrant prisoners on the news this morning that I feel like people can say what they want because it's being supported by the right-wing politicians. So it's not okay to call people certain names, but now it's almost okay to call out immigrants or gay people or women or people in wheelchairs because, well, it's on TV, the politicians are doing it, and suddenly it's become acceptable. And I think that's just going to get worse. And this is a huge problem, for everybody. It's a huge problem.
Well, it just feels like people can lie, like they can just say whatever they want, and they don't need to back it up with any measure of truth at the moment, and that's across loads of different subject matters. You just, you don't
out there, and it goes viral before you know it.
And the problem is there's a lot of people out there that if they see it, they think it's real and they think it's the truth, and that's the problem. I think the younger generation are more aware of this than perhaps the older generation, because we've been used to believing what we see. So I am hoping as time goes up and these teenagers join the working population, that we will go back to a more sensible time. But as I said, it's just a little bit scary right now, and we don't really know what's around the corner. But I guess that's why we've all got to act in a way that goes against that, and we can put things across in you know. I think sometimes as an individual, you feel like you've got no power, but if everybody, speaks up and acts the way that they would want to be treated themselves, that can be really powerful. So I
think I can't remember who said it. It wasn't Martin Luther King. It was somebody else who said something along the lines of, if you don't stand up, you're basically joining the oppressors. If you're going to stand by, if there was someone in a wheelchair getting the shit kicked out of them in the street and I walked past and did nothing to help, that effectively makes me as bad as the people doing it. And I kind of think there is a moral obligation. And this goes across so many different topics. People saying, well, I don't agree with abortions. Cool, don't have one. I don't agree with gays. Then don't go out with a man. Like, I don't know what the issue is. If you don't agree with doing something, just don't do it. I don't think murder's okay. So as of now, I've not killed anybody and I'm fine. And my other half's older than me by like 5.5 years. And I say 6 because it annoys him. He refers to me as his partner. And I said to him the other day, I was like, you do know that's what gay people used to say. They used to use the word partner all the time to not identify the gender of the person they're with. I said, so when you're going to work, he's a plasterer/builder, owns his own company, rocks up, with his toolbox, and you say, oh, my partner's done X, Y, and Z. I said, you do know they all think that you're gay, don't you? And he was like, no, they don't. They just think I've got a girlfriend. No, you're too old to have a girlfriend. You should have a wife. And the fact that you're using the word partner, they're all going to think you're gay. And he was like, and I'm like, no, I've heard it a million times in the gay community. They say partner. And if someone says partner to me, I assume they're talking about someone of the same sex. I don't think, if you said partner to me, I wouldn't think male. I'd think woman, because otherwise you'd say boyfriend or husband. So yeah, and I just said,
he's using that term and he's not afraid to use it. And I think everyone should be able to call their significant other whatever.
Well, I mean, yeah, he was like, if people think I'm gay, he was like, well, that's all, what can I do about it? Nothing, he's like, that's really it. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, I not have a problem with it. So what about the people think I'm gay? Is that such a big issue? No.
Well, this is it. And this is what it comes down to. Who you lie down with in bed at night does not affect my job, my day-to-day activity. So when it comes to hiring and firing and interviewing and making business connections, I don't care. I really don't care. And I wouldn't care if you were straight and going to bed with a woman or a man. And likewise, if you're gay, I just, it's not my business. I'm not interested. And I think there is that fine line of people being too interested. Well, he's gay, so we can't even work in here. What does it matter to you? Like, it's just, it blows my mind. Or people say, oh, he's gay, he might be inappropriate in the office. And I'm like, no, gay men know when you're straight because they can see how you're dressed. Like, you have nothing to worry about. You're safe.
And it doesn't matter what background or what you come from. Anyone can be inappropriate in the office, and anyone can be, a shining beacon in the office. It doesn't, your background,
it means nothing.
It's your personality, not anything else, not any of your other characteristics. So absolutely. I think that's where hopefully that's where people are changing, that each person is taken on their own merit, not by a label that being put in a box.
Absolutely. Okay, well, just to tie this up, what would be your advice to a young queer, gay, lesbian, bi, LGBTQ member, someone who's young, maybe in university, coming out of university and looking forward to getting into their career? What would be your advice of them being a queer male or female and in the professional world? How would you advise they go about that? They might feel pressure to downplay, as we've discussed. What would your advice be to them?
I'd probably say it's always best to be open. I understand that there's that thought process that goes in your head, that overthinking, like, how are people going to perceive me? Am I going to get the same opportunities as people that aren't gay if I'm to myself? But I think over time I've realized, like I said, having two separate lives isn't good, especially for me personally. I'm not willing to do it anymore. People need to accept me for who I am and not who I sleep with. And so, yeah, to a young queer person entering the professional world, I'd say know your worth. Probably seek out environments where you feel celebrated, not just tolerated, but also,
Dennis. Yeah.
Yeah, but also if you can't find that space right away, because in the industry that you're in, it may not be as open. I wouldn't let it change you or shake who you are. Like, I'd slowly build your skills, grow that network of people around you that you feel support you and you feel safe with. And I'd always kind of say that leadership probably isn't about conforming. Leadership is the opposite of conforming. It's about creating change. So as long as you work hard, you love what you do, and you're passionate about what you're doing and who you are, it will work for you, and you'll do well. I think when you start hiding yourself and trying to be somebody who you're not, that's when you're not genuine, and that can have a negative effect in your career.
Yeah.
And
very
if you want
difficult to keep up with it as well.
Exactly. And then people kind of think that you're fake, and they don't trust you. So just be who you are, and pick a career that you enjoy doing. And if you want to be the next leader, just remember that a leadership's job is to make changes, not to be a sheep and to follow what's gone before them. So being yourself doesn't detract from that. So yeah, I think that's the advice I would give.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. For anyone listening on Spotify, we are going to have a quick audio description at the end, just of some phone numbers and websites. If any of you have been affected by the topics in today's show, there will be some helplines there. And for anybody else who is seeing, they will be on screen. Just for the younger generation, there is an LGBTQ professional network on LinkedIn. I advise you join it. It's really lovely in there. Great group of people. If you need the link for that, do let me know, and we'll be able to put that on the screen, because you have to kind of join it. But for everything else, there'll be phone numbers and websites for support. Thank you, Alex. Enjoy your next acquisition, and I hope it goes very well. And thanks for being so open about it. Super.